Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. We are less than 1 month away from the beginning of the 2022 legislative session. Bills are being filed, budgets are being requested, and legislators are being indicted by grand juries. It's good to be home. My name is Andy Moore, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Dr. Scott Melson. Hello and Happy New Year, good sir.
Happy New Year to you, man. How are you?
I'm well. As listeners well know, Scott, you and I talk every day.
Yeah.
Although the last week has blown by since the new year started. I don't think we even asked, how was your Christmas? Did you have a good holiday?
Yeah, man, it was good. It was blessedly COVID free. It involved a lot of COVID testing, a lot of logistical logistical something. What's the word?
Logistics is,
Just
yeah,
logistics. There you go. Quit trying to make it an adjective. Involved a lot of logistics to make sure everybody had been tested at the appropriate time, the appropriate intervals, and everything was safe. And we were able to see my family and see Ashley's parents. We didn't get to see Ashley's extended family. This was we had planned a couple of months ago, when the situation was quite different. We had planned a big kind of New Year's get together with her extended family in Chicago. The week of Christmas, we had a sit down with her parents. We're like, this is not a good idea for anybody to go to Chicago, which is fortunate because some of the Chicago family ended up testing positive. None of them were able to get together either. It just, our New Year's was quiet. It was quiet at home, and but it was good. How about you?
Yeah, same. We actually have some family in Chicago as well, who flew down, and it was the same thing. We lots of testing, family in Texas, family here. Everyone got tested beforehand. Everyone got tested afterwards, several times. I think between December 20th and today, we're recording this on Sunday, the 9th. I think Katie and I have both tested probably 3 times each, based on exposures and some symptoms and potentiality there, as well as her mom. And so far everyone's been negative, but yeah, man, this wave of Omicron, whatever it is, sucks. I mean, you well know this as a healthcare provider yourself. But it is difficult. It is, and I think everyone is so weary, right, on this. And we're not going to dwell on this today in this episode, but to listeners, hey, we are with you. Like, this is hard. We will get through this, and there's perhaps, I don't want, knock on wood. I don't want to be too optimistic, but I think there's some indication that this wave could be potentially, right, the beginning of the end of this pandemic, if we're lucky. Now, the keys still are, of course, get vaccinated, get boosted, wear your GD mask. I will say we just ordered a bunch more KF94, right, which is the like Korean. They're not the
great.
duckbill ones, but it's the ones with like they're different than a N95, same effectiveness, but a different shape and more comfortable.
That's what I wear every day.
Yeah.
So I wear a KF94, a new one every day, with what's called a level 3 surgical mask over it. So I have two masks every day. It's very comfortable. It's my preferred COVID defense strategy.
Well, and as someone who is a primary care physician meeting with patients who have COVID, this seems reasonable, right? Like,
yeah.
I, as someone who stays at home and just goes into Lowe's occasionally to pick up some hardware, right? Like, generally that's my risk is primarily that. My daughter's daycare is closed for an additional 2 weeks. They're delaying their start because a ton of the staff are sick with either COVID or flu or both, right? And they were like, let's just wait 2 weeks. And so we are, like many parents, scrambling to cover childcare for the next 2 weeks so that we can kind of work around that. So I will be undoubtedly texting you late at night as I stay up to like finish emails that I did not get to during the day when Margot and I were, learning how to walk.
Hopefully we've got, I think we're probably going to peak here in Oklahoma. We'll probably peak with cases here in the next 10 days to 2 weeks, something like that. And then have, 4 to 6 week tail. After that, we'll see. That's what's happened. In other countries.
Yeah. South Africa and London, England. And
UK.
Like that, yeah.
So hopefully, this surge has it's been like a rocket ship going straight up. Hopefully it will plummet just like a rocket ship that's out of fuel. So
Hopefully, yeah. I'm nervous that it'll be just a long tail and it'll drag out until summer or something. I don't know. Right, I will be honest. Right now, it's cold today, and I was nice wearing a mask because it keeps my face warm. Like I went in to pick up some food from Tarahumara down there in Norman, and it was
nice. You drove all the way to pick it up.
well,
I
we were
mean,
in Norman. My father-in-law is moving, and so we were packing his house, and that meant lunch. And Pepe's is closed on Sundays.
if you're in the great town of North Oklahoma, you can't do any worse than can't do any better rather than Tarahumara.
It's been a
What you
long
said.
week. Yeah,
Yes.
Tarahumara.
You
It's good.
can't do any better than Tarahumara.
We really wanted Pepe's, which is of course perhaps the gold standard in Norman, but they're closed on Sundays. So, well, Scott, this is officially our first podcast episode of 2022, and we are, I believe, officially entering our 5th calendar year of recording the show. Can you believe that?
Hot damn.
I think we will hit our 200th episode sometime in March, right? Today is episode 190. So we've got 10 episodes before our 200th. Maybe, Scott, we'll get lucky and your prediction will come true that the pandemic will slide downward over the next 10 weeks and we can do something in person for our 200th episode.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
That's right. Yeah. If maybe if nothing else, it's just us, you and me, and Bailey, ideally in person, if not a crowd. But I think for our 100th episode, we did a show. Was that at New State Burgers? We did that.
I think that was our 100th episode. It was a great time.
That
Great
was a good
crowd.
time. Man, it was a different time. It was
It was
pre-pandemic.
pre-pandemic. It was because it was October of 19.
Yeah.
So it was
Sure enough.
about a month or so before a strange respiratory infection started infecting folks in Wuhan, China.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
It's like so weird to go back and think about like all the things like we were doing as this was starting and like no one knew, right?
Oh yeah,
Like
we had no idea, and that's I mean from a super like personal and nerdy thing, we with the podcast had really like found our groove, right? We bought new mics and a new mixer board. We bought a PA system to do more live events, and we were like, all right, we're finally hit the big time. And then we had to like we did two
shut it all
episodes and then
down.
shut it all down. Yeah. Well, here we are. Well, Scott, the legislative session starts February 7th, which is just shy of a month from now, at which Governor Stitt will deliver the State of the State address, as he does each year. What do you expect he's going to say? Let's talk about a few things today. Before you answer that, I'll let you think. Here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about state of the state. We're going to talk about bill filing. We're going to talk about the budget preview. We're going to talk about Representative O'Donnell and what's up with him, and then maybe a couple other quick mentions. But that's the main thing. So let's start with the state of the state. What do you? And I'm sure we'll cover this again as we get closer. But based on what you know now, what do you think we'll hear from the governor in his state of the state address?
So sometime in the first he's gonna the first paragraph will be a couple of sentences, introductions, and thank yous and hellos, dignitaries, whatever. But the first paragraph will end with "And Oklahoma is open for business." That'll be the tagline of the end of the first paragraph.
That's fair.
He will not mention COVID at all, except to the extent to say that unlike other governors, unlike other states, we relied on personal responsibility, and so we've conquered COVID, and that's really all he'll say about it. He'll talk about how the unemployment rate is really low. He'll make no mention at all of the tens of thousands of Oklahomans that have died during the last 2 years. He'll talk about McGirt and how it's destroying the sovereignty of the state, and how dogs are dying in Broken Arrow, and nothing can be done about it. He will, let's see. Yeah, he'll mention tax relief. So let's see. Yeah, open for business, unemployment, tax relief, McGirt. Oh, and then how much he's fighting Biden's federal overreach.
Interesting. Okay, I think that's some good predictions. I would challenge you on a couple of things. I think you're right. He will say Oklahoma's open for business, right? He will talk about um, the state of our state is good. We've overcome COVID. I think unemployment is something that he should celebrate, right? That's a legitimately good talking point. Um, I don't. I really wonder if he will address McGirt because essentially this speech is to the legislature, right? Like it's a joint session, he gives it to them, and I don't. And it's not up to them, right? Like he might, but I don't know that that wins him any points in this venue. Now I get that he is, low key
It's all he
can.
freaking talks about. It's like McGirt is like, I mean, like remember in when Biden said that Giuliani's campaign slogan was a noun, a verb, and 9/11. Same thing about Stitt, a noun, a verb, and McGirt,
That's
right?
that's true, and so I
McGirt
think
open
that's
for business.
so that's the real thing. I wonder if his state of the state is going to be. I mean, it's going to be a campaign speech, right, for president. Like that's
Well, it's going to be a campaign speech for governor, first of all, but then it'll be a campaign
yeah,
speech,
that's true.
right?
He
I
is
mean,
running for
like,
governor this year, and so I guess it really next year will be his campaign speech for a expected presidential run, at least expected by Scott and I. Yeah, he will celebrate a few things. I think he will talk about fiscal responsibility, right? And
fiscal or physical.
well, fiscal. We're not no. It's we're irresponsible that way, right? It's just smoke them if you got them. Don't wear a mask, right? Like that's the that's his take on that. But I think his and we'll talk about this more in just a minute. But I do think there's some important and relevant and potentially even good budgetary news this year, which is unusual in our state, and so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I think maybe we should make some kind of bingo game for State of the State. We
Yes,
did this a few years ago.
we absolutely should. I should take the day off.
Ooh,
Should
we
take it.
should do a live blog.
I should take the day off during the state of the state and play bingo, and we can turn it into a drinking game.
I'm 100% for that. And we did that live blog before, so even if we can't be together, we can be on video together, and then we can live blog it and play our bingo game. But I remember we made a bingo card. I've got it somewhere. We should just update that and publish it for public consumption. That's good.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
There's
Well,
also,
go ahead.
well, I should say because it is the start of the legislative session is coming up. Bill filing deadline is here. What is it, like in a week? Bill filing deadline, something like that.
It's I think the bill filing deadline ends January 20th. So that gives like 2 weeks before session starts.
So there's definitely some garbage that's already out there. We'll see some good stuff. There's a bill out there that's been requested by the Oklahoma State Medical Association that would require that 2 seats on the State Board of Health be reserved for physicians. So that's a bill that's out there that I'm personally quite interested in. I think we'll see some legislation, both negative in terms of some negative legislation in terms of vaccines and mandates and masking and those sorts of things. That seems like something that the ledge would do since we're still in the throes of the pandemic. I would expect that we'll see another run at lowering the state corporate income tax by the speaker. That was one of his goals last session. Didn't get the state income tax eliminated, though they didn't get it cut.
Right. I was like, they got it cut, but not eliminated. But
McCall still wants it to go away. He said that. So
yeah, let's circle back on that when we talk about the budget in just a minute.
then we've got the usual, the usual crew of malcontents that are proposing nonsense that I don't know how much airtime we want to give to the senator from Broken Arrow or the senator from Norman, and the garbage that they put out every year. But there's been a lot of that so far.
Yeah, no, I don't want to give much airtime to them. Nathan Dom and Rob Standrich, to whom you refer, uh, annually put out, some nonsense and some garbage, and so I think those bills, as a reminder, and Scott, you tweeted this the other day, and I think your tweet is a point well taken, right? That Every year, there's a bunch of bills that are filed, usually early, right? So they avoid the rush. So it's around this time of the year. They are filed with the explicit purpose of generating a news release, right? They put out a press release. There, here's the bill, and they're trying to get a little blip on your radar to let you know that these guys, it's always guys, right? They hate abortion, they love guns, and whatever else, right? This is just a news hit for them. Those bills rarely, if ever, even get heard in committee, right? Like they are DOA. Um, and I think it's particularly important this year because it's an election year and because both Senator Dom and Senator Standridge are up for reelection. No, they're not. Actually, they both are already in their last term. They both expire. They term out in 2024. Um, and so they've got nothing to lose. And they are undoubtedly setting themselves up or trying to get back in the news for whatever they do next, right?
Yeah, no, that's and for for what it's worth, uh, Senator McCourtney, who is now the floor leader over the Senate, he's taken on the position of floor leader from Senator previously held by Senator Kim David. Senator McCourtney retweeted my tweet,
Oh, did he
so
really?
yeah, so he's on the same page.
Yeah, that's good. So your tweet said, "This is an annual reminder that there are some members who file bills for the purpose of getting, in the news cycle, but they do not represent the majority of the legislators up there,"
Yeah,
which is exactly right. And I think, golly, given the events of the last 12 months, everybody, right, the public especially, would is sick of that shit, man. That's like we're just
just freaking waste of time. It's
It is a
of
waste
time.
of time. It's a waste of time and money. They use taxpayer funded resources, right? They use the staff to write these press releases. They put it out. It's not a lot of money, right? It's just, someone took 15 minutes to write a press release, but just knock it off. Like, why can't you just be cool and normal and not,
Just stop it.
yeah, that's right. Speaking of term limits, though, I do want to say that this is an interesting year because um, in the House, right? All the members in the state House, everyone's up for reelection every 2 years, and that includes the speaker and everybody, right? So this is Speaker McCall's last reelection campaign as Speaker of the House or in the legislature. He will term out in 2024, as will John Eccles, as will Terry O'Donnell, as will most of the leadership in the House and the Senate. Yeah, Senator Treat terms out in 24. Lonnie Paxton, he turns out in 28. Standridge terms out in 24. There's a lot of folks either in 24 or in 28 that will term out. So we've seen um, a lot of people that are in the final days or final years of their term, and that means in some cases a shift back, right, away from that bleeding edge of conservatism to folks who are interested at the very last minute in establishing a bit of a legacy for themselves. In some cases, it's really helpful when it's people in leadership because they're like, listen, once I'm reelected, right? So maybe not this year, but then next year in 23 and in 24, they have an opportunity to get some bills passed and to leave a legacy for themselves of good governance, right? And a positive impact on our state because they're not trying to pander to primary voters from their party.
Oh, I agree. I mean, and I hope that happens. I hope that's where I hope that's what we see. It's been, you know, the legislature. I think recently, so within what was it, 2 years ago, two years like that, maybe 4 years ago now, there was a concerted effort by some folks both inside and out of the legislature to get rid of the so-called platform caucus or get rid of a lot of the folks from the platform caucus. John Bennett was one of the most prominent members. There were some other members of the really, really far right elements of the Republican Party in the legislature that were pushed out by a coalition of some other Republicans, right? And that has enabled the caucus, I think, in some ways to appear and in some ways be less extreme, right? However, you've got folks that maybe look the part and say the right things, but it doesn't change the bills that actually get filed, right? So we have seen, while there's been a lot less inflammatory rhetoric coming out of the legislature in some cases, we've still seen some pretty extreme bills pass, right? I mean, we've seen the bills as you can run over protesters. We saw so-called constitutional carry was the first bill that Governor Stitt signed when he came into office. We've seen some really extreme stuff come out of this so-called more moderate version of the Republican Party. So while I hope that you are right that term limits, etc., inspire some folks to really think about what do they want to say they've accomplished in their time at 23rd and Lincoln, I'm cynical.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think that, Scott, is important to remember about what's happened in the past with that platform caucus. Some of those folks ran again in 2020, but I expect we'll see even more of them run again in 2022, especially with new district lines and and just I don't know, a renewed energy in that sector of the voting base, right? And so as we move towards November, gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this in January, but Election Day this November is going to be pivotal for the future of Oklahoma, right? Because honestly, while a number of the leadership in the legislature, I think for a lot of our more progressive friends are absolutely abhorrent, right? Like they would view them as just way too conservative. I hate to tell you, but like there are people who are worse, right? Like there are dangerously fringe elements, right? From both parties, but in this state, like we have a preponderance of folks on the fringe right who do not, how do I say this gently or accurately, who do not respect the rule of law, right? Who do not respect the role of government in improving people's lives, and would be more inclined to use government and use their power to restrict the rights of people under the guise of freedom, right? Now, let me say that again. They would use their power in the government to restrict the rights of people under the guise of establishing freedom. And that is, I think you have to there's a nuance there that people have to pay attention to. And that's, I don't like it. Like, I don't like, well, I mean, I'm certain that we will talk more about this, particularly in the fall, right? But like, I just want to put it out there that we don't even know, finally it isn't until April. We don't even know who all's actually running for office this year, but voters of Oklahoma, be vigilant, right? Like, and there are a number of opportunities for you to get involved. And we'll come back to this at the very end of the episode. I will say right now, listeners, as we move into the legislative session and we are looking at what bills are coming up for to be discussed, right? Well, most of them will be filed week after next, right? The week of the 20th. And so I think the 20th is a Thursday. So that week, 18th, 19th, 20th is when most of the bills are filed. If there's issues that you care about, listeners, we want to know. Send us an email at podcast@letsfixthis.org of what issues you care about most. If there's specific bills, let us know that too. But just what issues, right? Are you cared about the budget, about criminal justice, about healthcare, about recreational marijuana, whatever it is, right? Let us know, and I'll try to add them to our bill tracker. I'm getting it set up again this year. It was pretty helpful and I think well received last year. We used Legiscan. We did last year at least, and that worked out well. And so if there's certain issues, let us know so that we can help pay attention and maybe follow those things a little bit more closely. I will say for Scott and I, we sometimes like following the more obscure things, right? Feral hogs, sunscreen application by teachers. Those kinds of issues are sometimes interesting. food security in rural school districts. That's important, right? Maybe not something that affects my life directly because my kids go to school in Edmond and Oklahoma City, but it's something that affects a huge number of Oklahomans, many of my friends and family. And so those kinds of issues we want to know. Email us, podcast@letsfixthis.org, and we'll take a look. All right, Scott, let's move on to a brief budget preview. And I will say with a preface that in coming weeks, we'll have someone from the Oklahoma Policy Institute here to give us an update from their perspective. If we can get one of the budget chairmen, that would be great. One of the A and B chairmen from the legislature, that would be great. But we'll talk more and more about the budget, I'm certain, as session goes on. But as we look at it, they've announced, right? The Board of Equalization met last week and said the state's looking at about 10 bill. Now I have the hiccups. Says the state is looking at about a $10 billion budget that could be appropriated, which is the largest in state history. What do you, Scott? What do we expect that we'll see come budget discussion?
Well, of that 10 billion, about 9 billion of that is recurring, right? And that's what the governor will propose in his state of the state, and the legislature presumably will take up to spend on recurring expenses. So that probably means flat agency budgets, I would guess, right? So that leaves us about $1 billion surplus, which is one-time funds that could be used for one-time expenses. We could put that in the rainy day fund, which might make some sense. I maintain this. I should say I maintain. My suspicion is that part of that will go in the rainy day fund. I think that they'll put part of that in the savings. You don't want to hear what I think they're going to do with the rest of it.
Well, so both Chairman Wallace and Chairman Thompson from the House and the Senate, right, the Appropriations and Budget Chairman, have both said that they do not think that now is the time to cut taxes, right?
They're
going to cut taxes. To cut corporate income taxes or personal income taxes.
Yeah, they're going to cut taxes.
You think so?
Yeah.
Do you think it'll be so I have some faith in Chairman Thompson, at least. I don't know Chairman Wallace as well. He seems like a straight shooter. But I also think that he serves at largely at the pleasure of the speaker.
Entirely at the pleasure of the speaker. And I agree. They've both said that they don't think that now is the time to cut taxes. They said that last year that they didn't think it was the time to cut the corporate income tax either. They did, right? Like they say this all the time, right? At the beginning of session. Well, we don't know. I hope that I'm wrong, right? I hope I'm wrong. But if we get to the end of session and we haven't had a tax cut, you can color me surprised.
This is the bullshit that drives me bananas about politics. And I get that I now, I guess, essentially work in advocacy and politics full time, and it still drives me nuts. But that someone can honestly, truthfully say, I don't think now is the time to cut taxes. And then in 3 months be like, well, now it's the time, right? Like they could, no, back in January, it definitely wasn't the time. But now it's April or May, and I think it's the time to do it because they'll have another Board of Equalization meeting between now and then, right? That they'll have more updated numbers. They'll be looking at it.
I mean, the governor would love to run on a tax cut, right? Like, I don't think it's any secret that Senator Treat wants to be in Congress. He would love to run on cutting taxes again. Like, there's too many powerful interests that think that a tax cut is good for them politically for me to think that it's not going to happen. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm full of shit. I don't know.
No, I doubt it. I mean, sometimes you're full of shit, but I don't think it's on this issue. Now, so here's what I've heard from listening to interviews and reading interviews. I think I've heard two statements that seem to be they're definitely related. I don't think they're in contrast with one another, but these statements are now is not the time to cut taxes. We should save money. We should put money in savings, and we should flat fund agencies. And that's the thing that I bump on, and I need to go look it up. And this is where policy will come in to help, is that I think they can fund agencies flat and still cut taxes, right? Like this is where it's like, oh, these things are not mutually exclusive. Now, I will be honest. Week after next is the OK Policy Annual State Budget Summit. No. It's January 27th, end of the month. So they will kind of reveal a lot more information then. They'll finish their kind of analysis. And so I expect we'll have someone from their agency or their organization on around then to talk about it. Because I think that's what will happen, right? They could flat fund agencies at where they were funded last year, which is lower than they were funded 10 years ago. Just as a reminder, right? They have cut state agency funding over the last 10 years. They could flat fund them and still put some money in savings, right? Bump us up to like $2 billion in savings and maybe cut some kind of taxes. Maybe not
Yeah.
corporate taxes, but like maybe oil and gas, maybe
And they'll say we can do it
production.
because there's a surplus, even though the surplus is one-time funds. They'll say that they can do it because there's a surplus. They've done that before.
Mm-hmm.
They've cut taxes on the basis of one-time funds in the past. There's no reason they wouldn't do it. They did it. They did it last year. They
Mm-hmm.
cut taxes based on one-time funds last year, right? So
Do you, yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Is that all of this one time funds is ending, right? So the way that some of this federal funding that's flowing in, the legislature's been like, the Biden administration is just overspending money, but we'll take it and then we'll use that money to cut taxes. And so, do you think this will be an issue, Scott, where the governor and the legislature are at odds, right?
I don't think so. I think it might be an issue where the governor and the appropriations chairs are at odds. If Chairman Wallace and Chairman Thompson really don't feel like it's a fiscally sound decision to cut taxes right now, then they may be. But I mean, I will be. I mean, again, I don't nobody. In the, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody in the governor's office. They don't talk to me. So there's people that are way more in the know than I am, and maybe they think I'm crazy. But I think the governor will ask for a tax cut. I think McCall wants a tax cut. McCall specifically wants to get rid of the corporate income tax, and I think Treat wants a tax cut. So if the governor, the speaker, and the pro tem all want a tax cut, I think there'll be a tax cut.
I could see them not asking for it too forcefully, like not publicly, right? But maybe pushing for it behind the scenes, because then they can run on the fact that they got it, but they don't have to have the double speak in public, right? Because they've already said like now's not the time for a tax cut, but they can like close the door and be like, no, now is the time for a tax cut. You're going to do it. And so this way they can be like, hey, you know what? We had a good discussion and they all came to the same decision that we should, we've got the money. We should invest in Oklahoma's future by allowing businesses to pay less money.
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think is going to happen.
Hey, we'll find out in the next 4 months, man. 5 months.
There are also going to be some leadership changes this year, right? We had Representative Terry O'Donnell is resigning his position as Speaker pro tem, right? Why is he resigning, Andy?
Well, Scott, he and his wife have been indicted by a grand jury for roughly 2 or 3 felonies and 1 misdemeanor each.
I believe that is correct, yes.
Yeah, and so this relates to a bill from last year, right, where Representative O'Donnell, and to be clear, he's not resigning from the legislature,
just from
position. His position, which was basically second in charge, right, in the House. He is resigning from that position because last year he authored and ran a bill that explicitly allowed legislators' spouses to own tag agencies. So it was previously prohibited, right? And he said,
and then what happened, Andy?
And then his wife inherited a tag agency miraculously.
No, that's coincidence. Those two things don't have anything to do with each other.
Yeah, apparently she had a relative, I think it was her mother or someone, owned one, and she worked there and passed it on to her. And what's interesting, Scott, is that his statement, gosh, I don't have it pulled up, but it basically
it was wonderful. It was just ridiculous. His statement was just incredible.
It was essentially like, we did nothing wrong. This is all, a political hit job, and I'm just like Trump. I'm being persecuted for doing nothing wrong, just like Trump was. That's a good summary, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, but yeah.
So the thing is, there is a law, right, that legislators should be allowed to take a constitutional right or kind of provision to step aside on votes that they have a conflict of interest with, right? Not only did he not exercise that right, he didn't pass or abstain from the vote. He actually ran the bill, and so like just on face value, it seems pretty obvious, right? The dude ran a bill to allow this to happen so that his wife could inherit this tag agency. And if you don't know, tag agencies are gold mines, right?
Incredibly lucrative.
Yes, tons of money, and it is essentially a state-sanctioned monopoly on tags. I mean, you can go to any tag agency, but it's a huge deal. And so,
Because there's a limited number of tag agencies. Like you can't just decide this week, like, hey, I want to go own a tag agency.
right,
Like that's
right,
not a thing.
right. There's a limited number, and the public has to go to them for a service, and so they have a dedicated source of revenue. And the more people live in our state means the more money that tag agencies make. Now, location matters and all of that matters, but it's a big deal. He so the other thing with this, Scott, I think, right, that's important to note is that it's not like some DA who had beef with him filed charges. This went before a grand jury, and so
it was the multi-county grand jury, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, like this was the AG. This was like the AG's grand jury, not like
Yeah,
the Oklahoma County grand jury.
right, right. So a grand jury of peers, right? And grand juries are usually 20 people, I think.
I don't know how grand they are, but they're definitely bigger than a regular jury.
So this is just a great jury. It's not grand, right? Yeah. So I think grand juries typically have 20 jurors, but basically they hear all of the evidence presented to them, and then they choose whether or not to indict the person, and then it goes to trial. And so it's not like one. So his accusation that this is like a political hit job by one person or a couple people may be true. I honestly don't know, but I do know that a grand jury of his peers, of regular folks, had to hear the evidence and be like, yeah, we should charge him on this. And now it goes to trial, right, where everything else is presented. And I think that is, I will say, somewhat damning evidence, because it just smells. It smells like,
Like a friggin' rat.
yeah, it smells like corruption.
It smells like corruption.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. We'll obviously be keeping tabs on that. Again, I think Representative O'Donnell is in his last 2 years, so he's running for re-election in the midst of this, which is certainly difficult. But
He'll probably win.
do you remember, Scott, in 2017, 2018, when we had a rash of resignations and departures from the legislature, right? Kyle Lovelace and Ralph Shorty and all of the, for very different reasons, right?
Yeah.
Like,
One to go to prison, one to be a lobbyist.
yeah. Well, not.
No,
No, Lovelace was misuse of campaign funds.
who am I thinking of? Who that was John
Cockcroft.
Cockcroft.
Yeah.
He resigned to be a lobbyist.
Yeah. And also Scott down in Norman. I forget his last name now. But he left to be a lobbyist as well. But there was like 8 or 9 people who left in one term, and that left some big vacancies, right? There's several special elections, and then some folks who just didn't have representation for a period of time. All right, Scott. Well, before we go today, I think we're going to have a slightly shorter episode than usual. But I did want to mention that there are, I think, actually 3 ballot measures that are in the pipeline right now related to recreational marijuana, which is essentially legalized marijuana, right? It's state questions 818, 819, and 820, I think, are the numbers that they've been assigned. 2 of them are related. The other one's separate. The Oklahoman has some really good articles on this that as of today, I think they came out today, so they're still behind the paywall, but look for them this week, and I will link to them in the show notes if you're interested. But essentially, we saw this last year. Some of this has some big national money, right? Outside groups that are promoting this. And at this point, Scott, as a medical provider, how do you feel about our current medical marijuana economy? And do you think recreational marijuana would even be a noticeable change?
I mean, I guess maybe because like there's people that don't want to pay the 100 or 150 or whatever it costs to go get your medical marijuana license. I'll put it like this. I have never had a patient tell me they were going to go get their medical marijuana card and then also tell me that they couldn't.
Right. Right. No,
Like
it's incredibly easy.
I have yet to meet someone who wanted one and was told they didn't qualify. I'll be honest, I don't know. I mean, I assume that if we pass recreational marijuana, a bunch more people are going to try and open dispensaries, and I don't know how they're all going to stay open, but so far they are. So
we'll just, we should just convert Crossroads Mall to like a dispensary warehouse. Well, they're going to open, a grow operation there, aren't they?
I mean, just do that. That's fine.
I was just making a joke and I totally forgot about that. Yeah. Okay. Well, they're already on it. Crossroads Mall is becoming.
Yeah. Can we just put all the dispensaries there? It's like the one-stop shop. Everybody can go to Crossroads Mall and get your weed.
So, I mean, there's been a number of publications or nationwide publications that have identified Oklahoma as like one of or the largest marijuana market in the country.
We have more dispensaries than Colorado, Oregon, and Washington combined.
Golly. Yeah. I mean, one of our friends lives in Colorado and talks about how rarely they see a dispensary, whereas here 5 have opened up in the last year in the half mile near my house. 5 in one half mile. There's not that many of anything else. There's not that many fried chicken joints in that stretch.
Oklahomans love their weed, man. Imagine if you had to have a COVID vaccine to get your medical marijuana card. What a different man.
Yeah. What state is that it was implementing?
Quebec.
Oh yeah, Quebec.
Up in Canada. So in Quebec province now in Canada, to buy alcohol in a liquor store or buy marijuana, you have to have show your vaccine card.
Yeah, imagine that.
Vaccine rates are skyrocketing.
That's what kind of freedom is that, Scott? Got to be vaccinated to get your dope. I mean, and again, no. I'm not looking down my nose at anybody for having their marijuana card any more than people who buy liquor or whatever else. But I think that's perhaps a path to a higher vaccination rate for our state.
Yeah, man. Let's make it public health. Make a public health policy.
Hey, it doesn't have to even be a law. You can just choose to do it. If you are a dispensary owner listening to this podcast and you'd like to require vaccines, there's plenty of ways. If you want help on messaging on how to write that in a way that is more accessible and approachable to the public, even those that are, what do we call it, vaccine hesitant, let us know. I've got a little experience in this area. Happy to help. Right. So, all right, Scott. Well, that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you for being here, sir.
Man, I wouldn't miss it. Listeners, you should know it's we're not able to record on our usual Friday afternoon this week, so it is now about 9:30 on Sunday night. Hence why I sound congested and like I'm sleepy.
Listeners, we'll try to get back on and stay on track for the spring because I will say we're excited about the legislative session. And I will tell you, if you go to our website, letsfixthis.org, we have done a bit of a refresh on the website for the new year. There's new ways to sign up for our email list, to volunteer. We will have opportunities to volunteer both, not in person, right? Like there's ways that you can text bank, you can do calls, those kinds of things will be coming your way. As well as when it's appropriate and safe, perhaps some in-person efforts as well. We are really scaling up in 2022. Thank you for listening. Listeners, remember that decisions are made by those who show up. We hope that you will find ways to show up for your friends, for your neighbors, for our state in the coming week. Have a good night.